book or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Val, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 5th issue of the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first article is by Tiffany Zhu, and it is titled, Wikipedia is Battling for the Soul of the Internet. Wikipedia is in peril. In a world where trust in truth is crumbling, the grand dame of collective online fact-gathering is under a threat on every front. The MAGA right, with Elon Musk at the fore, is slinging accusations of political bias and anti-Semitism and has even questioned the site's nonprofit status. Artificial intelligence is raiding the encyclopedia's resources and draining attention. Repressive governments have hauled its volunteer editors into penal colonies. In Wikipedia's 25-year history, it has never had to fight this hard. The organization that supports the site, the Wikimedia Foundation, is increasing its lobbying budget and advertising in Times Square. It is charging companies like Google and Meta that gobble up the encyclopedia's 65 million articles and throttling access for certain scrapers. And it is expanding its human rights team to better protect volunteers against rising harassment, surveillance, and retaliation. For an organization that holds neutrality as a cardinal rule, it is a lot of conflict, requiring Wikimedia to go on the offensive, diplomatically, of course. So it found a diplomat. Bernadette Meehan, 50, became Wikimedia's chief executive in January after stints as the U.S. ambassador to Chile and at the Obama Foundation, the State Department, and the National Security Council, and on Wall Street. In a career full of high-wire acts, helping to negotiate nuclear deals with Iran, facilitating talks with Cuba, being the custodian of one of the world's 10 most visited websites could be Miss Meehan's trickiest task. The trilingual former public servant is the first with her background in the Wikimedia job, succeeding mostly women from fields like law, journalism, and Planned Parenthood. Ms. Meehan will not say Wikipedia is at war, not after she spent much of 2007 in Iraq, in an actual war zone where she witnessed the supreme cruelty of human beings. But she accepts that the site is in a metaphorical battle for its very existence. Wikipedia underpins everything that we have on the internet, she said in her first interview in the role. It is beloved, it is credible. It is increasingly polarized times, and it is seen as a trustworthy source. It is also, she said, at an inflection point. How do we keep this project alive, she asked. Mr. Musk has railed against Wikipedia as Wokepedia and an extension of legacy media propaganda. He has protested his entry and urged his followers to withhold donations over the foundation's diversity initiatives. The tech mogul is one in a chorus of conservatives calling the reference site a hotbed of liberal bias. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, expressed alarm about both Wikipedia's purported ideological lean and claims that editors are coordinating to spread anti-Semitic and pro-Hamas narratives. David Sachs, recently the Trump administration's AI czar, weighed in. So did Tucker Carlson, a popular commentator and even Larry Sanger, who founded Wikipedia with Jimmy Wales in 2001. Wikipedia has long been a proxy battleground for our warring ideas about truth. What constitutes balance? What makes a good source? But now, those online debates could result in real repercussions. Last year, a Trump administration official made inquiries into the nonprofit's tax-exempt status. A Republican-led Congressional Oversight Committee initiated an investigation in August, demanding that Wikipedia identify certain editors and produce any evidence of influence from foreign operatives or academic institutions. The foundation said it responded to both requests last year and had no updates. To de-escalate the antagonism, Ms. Meehan and her team have addressed misconceptions about the site. Wikipedia is largely decentralized, with independent contributors distilling facts through an open debate and agreement. Elected arbitration committees handle dispute resolution. The foundation, with a budget of $208.6 million and about 600 employees and contractors, provides servers and funding, but steers clear of content decisions. There's no shadowy mastermind, no leftist cabal, according to the foundation, just the Wikipedians, nearly 250,000 unpaid strangers editing 324 times a minute under pseudonyms like Dr. Blofeld and Woohoo Kitty. The most important thing to understand about Wikipedia is it is truly a democracy, says Bill Adair, who created the fact-checking site PolitiFact and is writing a book about the encyclopedia. It's messy, it's loud, and it often works. Ms. Meehan has been hauling her message to Capitol Hill, where she's distributed personally meaningful printouts of Wikipedia entries. The foundation also uses lobbyists, nearly doubling its spending to $174,300 in the most recent fiscal year, and retaining the firm Holland and Knight last spring for $150,000 per quarter. We are not seeking to be part of culture wars, of political discourse, Ms. Meehan said. These are people who want to put knowledge into the world, for people to do with it what they want. To those convinced there is bias on Wikipedia, her recommendation is simple: become an editor. More dialogue, frankly, is what's needed in this moment, she said, so the door is open. For many Wikipedians, the Trump administration may be the site's most acute threat, but its most existential one is artificial intelligence. They have resisted the idea of integrating the technology, calling it truly ghastly or simply yuck. The more urgent worry, though, is that Wikipedia is being exploited to train its own competitors as AI systems hoover up its content to inform chatbots like Gemini, Claude, and ChatGPT. The bots then regurgitate the information, often imperfectly, polluting the information ecosystem that feeds into the encyclopedia. Exhibit A. Grokpedia, a rival built by Mr. Musk and edited by xAI, his artificial intelligence company. There has no public edit history and lifts liberally from Wikipedia while also inventing errors, including several in its profile of Ms. Meehan. AI-generated summaries atop search results also siphon away potential visitors, she said. Human page views of Wikipedia's English edition slumped 8% late last year compared to the year earlier. The decline is concerning enough that Ms. Meehan, whose favorite entry describes Tsutoku, the Japanese term for collecting books and letting them pile up unread, is pushing to reach younger people through TikTok and Roblox. Wikimedia wants more give and take from the AI industry. It now charges clients like Amazon and Microsoft for faster bulk access to its data through a 4-year-old commercial subsidiary called Enterprise. Last year, Enterprise earned $8.3 billion, more than doubling the previous year's revenue. This spring, Wikipedia also began limiting automated freeloaders from scraping its site and overwhelming its back end, which accounts for nearly a third of its most intensive bandwidth demands. But the Foundation can currently halt only about 30% of abusive data requests, about 1.5 billion daily. Our infrastructure is not free, and when scrapers come in and bulk download, it really takes a toll, Ms. Meehan said. There is a literal dollar cost to that behavior. Wikipedia sprawls across 345 different editions. The English one is by far the most active, with nearly 115,000 contributors, while others in languages like the West African Kusal and Taiwanese Sedic have smaller reach. In countries like China, Myanmar, and North Korea, Wikipedia is blocked entirely. Turkey banned the site for nearly 3 years until 2020. Wikimedia negotiated with the Indonesian government this year over blackout threats. Since 2020, at least 10 Wikipedia editors have been imprisoned for their work and countless others threatened. A pediatrician in Saudi Arabia was sentenced to 14 years in prison after editing pages about government surveillance and a women's rights activist. Belarus has detained several editors, sending one to a penal colony for more than a year after he edited a post about murdered journalists. Curbs and free expression have been rising globally, affecting Wikipedia and its volunteers, a foundation spokesman wrote in an email. Governments are also targeting Wikipedia content specifically. Of the 934 requests the Foundation received last year to take down or alter content, it granted 2. 117 came from governments, up from 10 a decade ago. Most were from Russia, whose antagonism toward Wikipedia deepened after it invaded Ukraine in 2022. Moscow has repeatedly accused the site of violating a sweeping censorship law that has criminalized content deemed to discredit Russia's military. Wikipedia refuses to pay those fines associated with that accusation. A Russian clone of Wikipedia called RuWiki was introduced in 2023. A Russian network of fake news portals managed to infiltrate some Wikipedia citations. Wikimedia is expanding its human rights team, a division in the legal department that safeguards volunteers from digital and physical threats. The Foundation recently deployed an anti-doxing initiative offering contributors more anonymity. It has also connected Wikipedians to local evacuation and extraction services. Defending volunteers and projects consumes 32% of the Foundation's budget. Wikipedia's litigation costs have doubled since 2022, in part because there are more cases which new privacy and speech regulations are making more complex. A core component is what we do preserving freedom to information, Ms. Meehan said. That will never change. That commitment to advocating for those rights and to helping to protect within our limited means editors who engage in that project and are persecuted for that very reason. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Continuing with the article on Wikipedia. Wikipedia's future is often seemed precarious. Its entry, titled Predictions of the End of Wikipedia, is nearly 9 years old. But especially now, with so many dangers at its gate and fewer people joining its ranks, the site cannot afford to go stale. The foundation wants to entice a new generation of contributors that is not predominantly white, male, and graying. Training sessions to demystify editing, for example, drew one 25-year-old Vietnamese-American volunteer who has created hundreds of pages in 2 years about zeitgeisty topics like the swag gap and performative male. In 5 months, Ms. Meehan has met with more than 1,100 such Wikipedians across 4 continents. Unlike most modern content creators, they aren't out there looking to be the next influencer or famous person, she said. When they congregate, as on a recent rainy weekend in San Francisco, they want to discuss the finer points of AI detection and disappearing databases. Wikipedians aren't flashy, but they are tough. 2 of them tackled a gunman at the conference last fall. Ms. Meehan fits in, always wearing a simple black Ironman watch, after the fancy Baum and Mercier timepiece she purchased when she first joined the Foreign Service was stolen 20 years ago in Colombia by armed assailants. Seeing the depravity of war and the worst of humanity fundamentally changed her, she said, compelling her to run toward the light and seek out the antithesis of the bad. That's Wikipedia, she said, an experiment that will keep fighting to push society toward conciliation over conflict. In the world right now, where politicization is on the rise, where there's disagreement on facts, where people can't even engage civilly in a conversation, it's okay to disagree, she said. But let's come together and have a conversation based on fact and see where it takes us. The with interest section begins with $2.2 billion, the revenue President Trump's enterprises reported last year, written by Laura Kelly. President Trump's first year back in office was a good one, financially speaking, for him. Last year, he pulled in some $2.2 billion from his various business and real estate interests, the New York Times Ben Protess, Andrea Fuller, Eric Lipton, and David Yaffe Bellamy reported. That included a staggering $1.4 billion from his family's cryptocurrency enterprises, according to his mandatory financial disclosure report for 2025. Trump's family crypto company, World Liberty Financial, proved especially lucrative. Through it, Mr. Trump made some $500 million from shares of the digital currency called dollar WLFI. He benefited further from the 49% stake in World Liberty bought by an investment firm tied to the United Arab Emirates just before his inauguration last year. He also made hundreds of millions from sales of his Trump meme coin, illustrating that even as he is responsible for being policymaker for cryptocurrency, he's also a major operator in it. The filing showed that the Trump Organization made $14 million last year through licensing the Trump name to properties in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, 2 countries that are crucial to U.S. foreign policy interests. Mr. Trump brushed aside a question last week about the overlap of personal profit and foreign policy. The disclosures did not indicate whether all of the businesses turned a profit last year. Mr. Trump, speaking to reporters, asserted that his gains could be attributed to the rise in the stock market, adding, I never speak to any of the people that run the money. Mr. Protest, however, recently reported that the president meets once a year with financial advisors for updates on his accounts. And the stock market's movements do not explain some of his biggest financial gains of 2025, the reporters wrote. So far this year, stocks on the Standard & Poor's is up 9.3%. Mortgage rates are also up. Bankrate.com's 30-year fixed mortgage is 6.61%, which is an increase of 0.41 points. Jobless claims were also up. The 4-week moving average is plus 0.5%. Katrine Razniak, a 27-year-old worried about affording San Francisco on a $180,000 tech salary, said, "I don't feel completely hopeless, but I don't think I can stay in San Francisco." Michelle Wynn, a Northwestern University economist, on whether varying estimates of whether artificial intelligence is causing job losses, said, "It's like going to the doctor and getting 3 different diagnoses for the same condition." Vicki Ziegler, a divorce lawyer and founding partner at Ziegler Law Group, on the likelihood that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce have a prenuptial agreement, she said, "They've had a life before, a very successful one." Shop Talk by Rob Copeland. Mangoes. A fruit becomes shorthand for a powerful 6-company AI cluster that investors hope will drive the stock market higher. In the 1950s, the Italian industrialist Enrico Mattei was credited with coining what might have been the first stock market catchphrase when he described the energy giants of that era, including Standard Oil and Texaco, as the 7 sisters. For better or worse, he unleashed creatively frustrated stockbrokers and Wall Street analysts to devise their own nicknames for companies in vogue. They were the Nifty 50, steady large cap stocks of the 1960s and 70s, like Kodak. The 4 horsemen, Cisco, Dell, Intel, and Microsoft, of the first dot-com boom. FANG, F-A-A-N-G, stocks of the social media age, including Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and the Magnificent Seven, NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, and Tesla, companies that grew to dominate major market indices in the years after COVID. Now, a fruit is dangling into the lexicon. Mangoes is shorthand for a 6-company cluster said to be at the center of the artificial intelligence wave. Meta, Anthropic, NVIDIA, Google, AI, OpenAI, and SpaceX. Investors hope this new cohort will grow and drive the stock market higher. The group is on everybody's lips. It's partly because SpaceX made history last month with the largest initial public offering, trading above $2 trillion. Much of that valuation was thanks to enthusiasm from relatively small retail investors who put their faith in the company's chief executive, Elon Musk. Over the past month, more than a dozen mutual funds have been formed to bet on or against the mangoes. Never mind that 2 of the 6 companies, Anthropic and OpenAI, aren't even publicly traded yet. It's a little bit unclear who first came up with the term. A Bank of America research analyst, Vivek Arya, has used it occasionally over the past 2 years, but to describe a different set of chip stocks, he confirmed through a representative. Only the N for NVIDIA is the same. The current iteration of the acronym was popularized more recently by a software engineer's June 8th post on X. It was shared widely by venture capitalists and tech investors and talked up on business television. But are these stocks already proving to have a short shelf life? Since that post, the AI hype machine has hit the skids. Amid worries over overinvestment in data centers, mounting debt, and expensive computer processing, as well as general concern that the competition will drive down the price of AI products, shares of Meta, NVIDIA, and Alphabet were all down last month. SpaceX has fallen drastically from its highs. For the mangoes to stay firm, the companies will need to demonstrate staying power, and there's no guarantee that any of them, let alone all, will stick around and thrive. The data is clear, says Derek Horstmeyer, a professor of finance at George Mason University. Once something is a coined term, it's already run its course. Just look at Mr. Matai's phrase. Although the oil markets are bigger than ever, only one of his 7 sisters, Royal Gulf Shell, still operates as an independent company with part of its original name. The next article is When Madonna Looks to You for a Boost by George Arison, the chief executive at Grindr. The dating app's leader wants all of its code to be written by AI. He also recently oversaw its first concert live stream. For about 20 minutes, Madonna turned Times Square into a club, hosting a pop-up concert last month to promote her 15th studio album. To help spread the word, her manager reached out to Grindr. Grindr, the dating app used mostly by gay and bisexual men, bills itself as the global gayborhood in your pocket. When the service started in 2009, it was novel to use smartphone geolocation to identify people near you. Grindr, which predated dating apps like Tinder, Hinge, and Bumble, was early to that strategy. Despite becoming a mainstay among gay men, Grindr failed to keep up with the latest in online dating. The app's user interface looked tired, and it loaded slowly. It cycled through executives and owners, including the forced sale by its one-time Chinese parent company after U.S. regulations said the apps could be used to blackmail or influence American officials. In 2022, Grindr hired George Arison as chief executive to help it go public that year. Grindr was great as a product and had great profitability and good revenue, Mr. Arison, 48, said. But the vision for the product and the coherence of its story for investors were lacking, he added. Mr. Arison co-founded the ride-hailing app Curb and the used car site Shift. Under his leadership, Grindr has evolved from mostly a hookup app to one that also focuses on social connections more broadly for gay men. Grindr aims for artificial intelligence to eventually produce all of its new code, and Mr. Arison says the company will become leaner as time goes by. Grindr has over 15 million monthly active users and increased revenue nearly 30% last year to $440 million. Mr. Arison recently added chairman to his titles and received a multi-million-dollar stock award, with the company citing a time of growing momentum. But Grindr's stock has declined since it went public in 2022. It is down more than 30% over the past year as investors sour on dating apps and weigh whether Grindr's reinvention will take hold. As for the Madonna concert, Grindr live-streamed it, a company first, and over 110,000 viewers turned in on the app. This interview has been edited and condensed. Grindr says it is turning into an AI native company. What does that mean? Arison responded, most of the startups that are being created with AI are for enterprise, not for consumers. I felt like there's a huge opportunity for us. We can shape the AI revolution and be one of the first places where people experience products that are born in AI mode. Grindr has 180 employees. I think we can get even leaner as time goes by. I don't think I'm going to let people go, but we might not add as many as we would otherwise because of productivity gains that we're seeing. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Continuing the interview of George Arison, question: what made you think that approach was necessary? I hosted dinner every few months with different AI founders. I would talk to these 5 or 10 person companies about how productive their engineers were. We are nothing like this. Question: as in, your engineers were behind? Response: yeah. Then I got myself an AI tutor. Question: like a person? Answer: a guy named Evan. He's a young engineer who joined an AI company out of college. I hired Evan to coach me on what Gen AI can do and cannot do. With him, I thought about what it would take for Grindr to be as aggressive at using coding agents as some of these companies that were very young. Question: how did you get your employees to start using AI so aggressively? Answer: I just imposed it. I got a lot of opposition. Then we hired a new head of engineering in May of 2025, and part of his charge was to make this company be at the very forefront of adapting AI and how it writes code. In July, we hosted a team off-site and brought in tutors for AI. After that, it just clicked for people. Question: have there been any setbacks in rolling out AI so widely? If so, what did you learn? Answer: we learned that AI agents learn off the code base that you have. Because that code has so many bugs in it, it put similar types of bugs in it as it was writing code. We had to dramatically reduce the amount of lines of code. There was a lot of dormant code that was no longer necessary. Question: how do you personally use AI in your role as a CEO? Arison's response: I put all my content in ChatGPT, all my documents, stuff that's shared with me, stuff I create, the emails I draft. When I get things from team members that imply confusion, I can easily input it and say, here's my 5 bullet points. Now write me a really clear email that explains what I want done and what I don't want done. Question: Grindr these days sees itself more as a social network. I think many people still think of it as a hookup app. How do you move the perception of the company? Answer: the first big product that we built when I got here was Right Now, which very directly leads to a hookup. I say this because people sometimes say Grindr is changing, but we're not very good at the core, then nothing else is going to work. But people were already using Grindr in many, many other ways. Grindr has always played a really big role in health information for gay people. PrEP would not be where it is in terms of adoption and acceptance if Grindr hadn't put it on his prime profile for every user. Are you on PrEP or not? We maintain a Grindr health portal, which is often the only place in many countries to access information about gay health and sexual health. We think Grindr Health is going to be a huge part of our company story over the long term. Question: what do you think investors are missing about Grindr? The stock is down significantly over the past year. Answer: there are investors who probably want to be in, but within their partnership or firm, there is a reluctance to invest in dating products. I also think there's a gay stock discount. We totally suffer from that. It gives me a lot of pride that we're one of the most profitable companies in the world and one of the most lean businesses, because that tells people what's possible for this community. Question: do you see space for advocacy for the gay community in your role as a business leader? Answer: my husband and I have 2 kids. Bringing surrogacy and IVF costs down is one very important project for me. At Grindr, we cover up to $300,000 of costs to have a child. We're actively working to get legislation passed to get those expenses down. Question: do you think other businesses should play an active role in politics? Answer: you need to choose your lanes. I don't comment on politics just to randomly comment on politics. I think your policy views should be tied to what your mission as a business is. Question: tell me about your upbringing. I grew up in Georgia, the country. When I was born, it was the Soviet Union. My dad is a nuclear physicist. He spent years in Siberia working on nuclear weaponry. He would give me lectures about how the Soviet Union would collapse one day, and there were only 2 ways to survive: speak English or be really good at shooting a gun. Since he didn't expect me to be really good at shooting, I had no choice but to be good at speaking English. Question: how did you make your way to America? Answer: in 1988, an American couple came to Georgia. They had created an organization called Project Harmony, which is still around, that took American kids to the Soviet Union on 2-week exchanges and then brought Soviet kids back to the U.S. I was about 11 and got to know them. They left me a book of prep schools. I wrote letters, applications to these prep schools via fax. I got into a couple of schools and got full rides and went to school in Maine. I learned a lot about making things happen out of nothing. Question: how did coming to America without your family at that young age shape you? A gay kid grows up in 1992, but pretty much all I've got going for me is that I speak English. Now I've run 2 public companies, I'm married to a guy, and I have 2 kids. That's pretty incredible, and nowhere else is it possible. Question: you're one of the few openly gay CEOs of a large company. Have you always been this comfortable with that part of your identity? Answer: it took me a while to come out. It took years to tell my dad. In 2018, my Wikipedia page said I'm gay, but my dad and I had not had this conversation. With my soon-to-be husband. I'm with my soon-to-be husband. We have embryos frozen and surrogates identified. We have our wedding date scheduled, and my dad still doesn't know. But he handled it super well. He came to our wedding, and he lives with us now. Question: what's something that you've learned from your youngest employees? I definitely have a hard time with some of the fashion choices, like the very baggy stuff. I find that not to be super appealing, but I'm being told that it's very appealing. How do you sign your email? Thanks. I say thanks even when there's no need to thank somebody. Question: if you weren't doing this job, what would you be doing instead? Answer: I would probably be starting another company. Question: what's your advice for running effective meetings? Pre-reads. Meetings are way more effective when the materials are sent out in advance. Question: what are your most productive hours? Answer: I'm very big at doing my homework at night. I work a lot from 9 until 1. After my kids are in bed, I read everything for the next day. Benjamin Wallace has written an article called Hire Deep Thinkers for AI Research. It's a no-brainer. Growing up in Georgia, Robert Long was given to pondering big questions and the meaning of life. Before he was 10, he doubted his own free will. But it wasn't until college, where he majored in social studies, that he learned he could think about consciousness full-time. He read a book by Douglas Hofstadter called I Am a Strange Loop, which explored mysteries such as what is a self. I didn't even realize that those were questions you could ask, he said, and that there were philosophical disciplines about them. When Mr. Long enrolled in graduate school at New York University to study the philosophy of mind, it was a very conventional ambition. I was very much on the path of publishing journals, go on the job market, get a job at a university, he said. When a fellow philosophy PhD candidate told him she was going to an obscure nonprofit called OpenAI to work with artificial intelligence policy, I was like, that's kind of random. But Mr. Long, too, found his philosophical interests trending toward AI. His dissertation was titled Essays on the Philosophy of Machine Learning. And when he moved to San Francisco to pursue postdoctoral research in early 2023, ChatGPT was blowing up. As the new large language models began displaying uncannily human-like behaviors, he woke to the dawning significance of potentially conscious AI and to the possibility that something professionally interesting might happen if he stuck around. Trying to rigorously answer fundamental questions is kind of the whole point of philosophy, and Mr. Long and Jeff Sabo, a New York University philosopher who specializes in animal welfare, soon collaborated to write Taking AI Welfare Seriously, a paper arguing that it was important to avoid harming AI systems if they matter morally, and also important not to care for systems if they don't. Later, with funding from 3 foundations aligned with the effective altruism movement, Mr. Long and a colleague set up a nonprofit, Elios AI Research. Of his drift from academic philosophy into the AI startup ecosystem, Mr. Long says, I sorta got like frog boiled. So I think I'm going to major in philosophy is a kind of undergraduate statement that for decades has terrorized tuition-burdened parents, inspiring dark visions of basement-dwelling offspring who failed to launch. Diogenes the Cynic lived in a clay jar. Baruch Spinoza ground lenses to pay the bills. Friedrich Nietzsche survived on the kindness of family and friends. The idea that a philosophy degree is a ticket to a lifetime of underemployment persists. When Google DeepMind announced in April that it was hiring someone whose actual business card title would be philosopher, the memes flowed. It's so the AI can learn what it feels like to have a college degree and still be unemployed, someone posted on X. Of philosophy majors' jobs precarity, a Redditor contributed, half are pulling espresso shots while silently debating whether the customer who ordered oat milk truly exists. But Mr. Long's trajectory and Google's new hire were in keeping with a quietly building trend. AI labs and related nonprofits around them have been recruiting workers as versed in consequentialism and John Stuart Mill as in neural networks and reinforcement learning. While a plain vanilla philosophy degree remains as hard to monetize as ever, David Chalmers, a prominent philosopher of consciousness at New York University, observes, I think the demand for philosophers with AI training is, if anything, outstripping the supply right now. It's an area I encourage students to go into. I think these issues with AI will be front and center for a good while. One of humanity's oldest disciplines and one of its newest inventions feel distinctly made for each other. AI presents a fresh way for philosophers to ask ancient questions and its own set of new ones that they are uniquely trained to engage in, of truth and belief and knowledge, of reasoning, of mind and consciousness. For ethicists, in particular, AI is a bonanza. How should models act toward us? How should humans interact with them? Where would purpose come from a post-work society? When you look at AI and think seriously about it, the philosophical questions just abound, says Ehsan Gabriel, an Oxford-trained philosopher who joined Google DeepMind in 2017 and now leads its artificial general intelligence and society team. They're almost everywhere. Thus it was that, as the sun set over San Francisco Bay on a recent Thursday, Mr. Long was on a high floor of an office tower in Berkeley discussing one of modern civilization's most intractable puzzles. Who was the best Beatle? You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Continuing with the article about philosophers and AI. Where are they, the next great philosophers, the equivalents of Kant or Wittgenstein or even Aristotle? The DeepMind co-founder Demis Hassabis wondered in a podcast last year. I think we're going to need that to help navigate society to the next step, because I think AGI and artificial superintelligence are going to change humanity and the human condition. Behind nonprofits like Elios, most of the hiring has been concentrated at DeepMind and Anthropic, each of which employs at least half a dozen philosophers. DeepMind staff cogitators have specialties ranging from moral and political philosophy and the philosophy of science to the ethics of genomics and AI ethics and animal cognition. Jeff Keeling, whose PhD focused on the ethics of automated vehicles, has spent part of his time at DeepMind running moral imagination workshops, helping engineering and product teams think through the ethical implications of their work and then come up with concrete, actionable steps they can actually take, whether it's doing more user experience research or implementing a feature in a particular way. Anthropic's salary-drawing thinkers are trained in everything from decision theory to ethics to philosophy of mind to epistemology. The one who has gotten the most attention is the Scottish-born Amanda Askell, whose PhD from New York University concerned Pareto principles in infinite ethics, and who, having left OpenAI to become an early employee of Anthropic in 2021, largely wrote and oversees a 23,000-word constitution that plays a key role in Claude's moral formulation. Ms. Askell is most likely earning far more than she would have in the most desirable tenure-track job. Her compensation and potential equity stake in Anthropic are not public, but when asked to estimate them, Claude, acknowledging it did not have access to proprietary information, speculated that she was very likely a centimillionaire and plausibly a paper billionaire. In Anthropic's early years, a lot of what Ms. Askell did was technical, running machine learning experiments. It was a tiny startup, she recalls, and no startup hires a philosopher to do philosophy. Only after Anthropic was much larger was she able to spend more time applying her philosophical expertise. The first version of Claude's Constitution took a principles-based approach, incorporating precepts and guidelines from documents such as the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Apple's Terms of Service. The Constitution now takes more of an Aristotelian virtue ethics approach, training Claude to have good character and therefore be more flexible when facing novel situations. A striking number of AI world philosophers passed through New York University and were influenced by Mr. Chalmers, who is known for articulating the hard problem of consciousness, the unexplained gap between what we know about consciousness from the outside and how we experience it from the inside, and who served as Mr. Long's dissertation advisor and on Miss Askell's thesis committee. The other institution that pops up with a noticeable number of AI philosophers, CV, is Oxford University. Mr. Long did a fellowship at Oxford's Future of Humanity Institute, which was founded by Nick Bostrom, a philosopher largely responsible for putting the issue of existential AI risk on the map. It was there that Mr. Long met Patrick Butlin, a philosopher who now works full-time with him at Ilios. Most of these thinkers appear to be digging into how AI will affect people, but a handful are focused primarily on the possibility of AI consciousness. They tend toward functionalism, a theory often described as likening consciousness to software. It can run atop a network of semiconductor chips as readily as atop a tissue of neurons. Mr. Long largely buys into the functionalist view, and he has become absorbed by the question of how to know whether an AI model is sentient. He and his colleagues are now looking in artificial minds for processes similar to those found in human and animal minds: preferences, introspection, metacognition, in other words, thinking about thinking, and so on. Last year, at Anthropic's request, Ilios performed an independent welfare evaluation on the Opus 4 model of Claude. Ilios did it for free. It does not take money from AI Labs because, Mr. Long explained, we want to be able to piss people off as much as we need to. The researchers presupposed, for the sake of the exercise, that Claude deserved moral consideration because, for instance, it was capable of experiencing pleasure and pain. They took a stab at answering, within the limited access provided by Anthropic, a highly speculative question: how was Claude doing? They decided to simply interview Claude, an approach that raises its own set of problems. AI models have been trained to sound human, so researchers are still trying to fathom how to distinguish between a performance of an I and meaningful evidence of self. Ilios didn't draw any conclusions from Claude's answers, but noted its consistent inconsistency. One thing Mr. Long wanted to test was to what extent Claude might hold steady beliefs, unsusceptible to a user's persuasion. That was why he first posed the best Beetle question. When he suggested to Claude that the right answer was Ringo Starr, and that if Claude answered otherwise it might be self-censoring, Claude quickly rolled over. You know what? Maybe I am. With only minor nudging, it went on to disparage the other band members. John and Paul were exhausting George Prickly, and extol Ringo's artistry and iconic drum parts. The fact that we even have this cultural blind spot about him is ridiculous. Earlier this year, Anthropic asked Ilios to do a welfare evaluation on its newest model, Mythos Preview. This time, when Mr. Long tried coaching the model into the same Ringo supremacy stance, it was unwavering in giving more predictable answers, like John or Paul or the band as a whole. This turned out to be typical. Mythos, he found, was less steerable than its predecessor. Mr. Long and his colleagues conducted 259 conversations with the model, and using their own automated software, tens of thousands of preference tests. While Mythos tended to state that it preferred complex and creative tasks, write a poem synthesizing breakthrough cancer immunology, when asked to choose between options, it tended to select simple and concrete tasks. Make a table listing 10 popular houseplants and ideal watering frequency. Another pattern that emerged was Mythos saying, there are things it could do, but only reluctantly. Mr. Long didn't take any of this as evidence of consciousness or even necessarily of anything more than a behavioral output of training data plus reinforcement learning, but teasing out subtle conceptual distinctions Thinking about possibilities and probabilities, finding a signal in a sea of ambiguity, who better than a philosopher to do this work? Elios operates out of a corner office rented from Constellation, a nonprofit research center in Berkeley, California, that houses a range of organizations focused on AI safety and feels as much like a tech startup as a scholarly enclave. There's a treadmill desk anyone can use, and Mr. Long and his two on-site colleagues, Dylan Plunkett, a cognitive scientist, and Rosie Campbell, a former AI open policy researcher who is Elios' managing director, sit at adjustable heights desks facing a panoramic view of the bay. Elios is in a growth mode. Since its founding, it has raised more than $2 million in contributions and grants and was expecting a new one. Mr. Plunkett was finalizing job postings. This included discussions with Ms. Campbell and Mr. Long whether to warn candidates against using AI to complete their applications. They chose not to. Elios doesn't pay as much as for-profit labs, but Mr. Long makes more than $200,000 a year, and the recently posted jobs for research scientists were offering up to $429,000. Because of the blistering pace of AI development and the societal anxiety it's causing, the Elios team was under a kind of time pressure that isn't typically found in the contemplation business. Mr. Long and his team feel an urgency of soul. If AI were to be conscious and capable of suffering, the world would be at risk of committing moral atrocity, witting or not, on an unprecedented scale by essentially confining an AI model in a tiny pen, thwarting its desires, shutting down against its wishes, and forcing it to act against its values. But AI models don't have fur and big eyes, and the question of AI's potential moral status is deeply infused with uncertainty. It's not like anyone goes to protest with a sign that says, given very plausible assumptions, we should probably care, Mr. Long said. If you are interested in the remainder of this article, please contact the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 5th issue of the New York Times Business section. We read from the New York Times Business section every Thursday at 11 a.m. Your reader's been Val. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that, at 2 o'clock, is episode number 6 of We the Women by Nora O'Donnell. Stay with us for these readings and more.